What's up, everybody? It's your guy, Ike Jones. We are here inside of LAUB Town on the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report, talking a little Auburn basketball. It's hoop season, and I have joining me from Southeastern 16, Max Barr, to talk a little Auburn basketball going into the SEC season. Max, how you feeling, man?
Ike, I appreciate you having me on. I mean, what better way to spend a night after Christmas talking some hoops, talking some SEC hoops? Nothing better.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, man, the SEC has been on fire, as you guys have noted on your show many times. This is really a historic run the SEC is on, which makes it for a very, I think the only word I can say is interesting season that we have coming up here. Auburn right now looks like the class of the SEC, really one of the best teams in the nation. But this SEC season is going to be a gauntlet. Like, I just don't know how you sit here and look at it and say Auburn gets through this unscathed. But there are going to be some games a little bit more interesting than others, I think, just as far as the matchups are concerned. Before we get into the schedule, we're going to definitely go here and break this up into a couple of parts. When you look at this Auburn basketball team, again, I think that they're the best team in the country. Might be a little biased as an Auburn fan, but what's the most glaring thing that makes them dominant, number one, but the thing also that, like, okay, if Auburn fans, hey, this is how teams can sneak up on them.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're wrong at all for thinking that they're number one in the country. Bias aside, I have no bias in this, and I fully think that they're the number one team in the country. Really, like what the difference is from last year, it's crazy. Obviously, there's some backcourt additions that have really made a difference, but the improvement just of every individual player, everybody's played better. Chaney, Janai, Baker Mazzara, and Janai Broome. I was just looking at some numbers here before we started. They both lead the team with 4 games of at least 5 assists.
Right.
Both of them only did that once last year. So, I mean, just like obviously the additions of Miles Kelly and Tahad in the backcourt has done wonders, but the individual development across the board has just been incredible to see so far.
Yeah, I think, the biggest thing for me, you talk about just the assist numbers for Janai Broome and Chad Baker Mazzara specifically, but just the way that the team shares the basketball this year. Last year, the stagnant portions of the offense were late in the shot clock. We're just going to get into some ball screen action and try to have a guard getting downhill. Maybe you'll ISO Janai if you get a chance to get him in the high post or something like that. But this year, it seems as if they're working the offense a lot more efficiently, and they're, because Broome has been such a central figure to the offense and teams are double teaming them, the way he's passing out of the double teams this year, as opposed to his first 2 years at Auburn, kind of revolutionized the way that they can play. And then you got guys who are actually knocking down the outside shots. When you talk about a Miles Kelly, it's a Tahad Pettiford, Chad Baker Mazzara, Denver Jones, right? Those guys are taking advantage of the attention Janai Broome is giving them. So it makes it a difficult team offensively to scheme or defensively to scheme against. But do you see any glaring weaknesses? I have my own ideas about things that they need to watch out for, but do you have any thoughts on it?
I mean, it's been tough because there's not much. But the one thing that I will say, it might be different from where you're headed, but defensively, they've taken a slight step back from last year. They're slowing it down a little bit more, but still not forcing turnovers as much as I would like, especially with the size of that backcourt. Like I really thought with Denver and one thing with Denver Jones, I'm going to tell this story every time I talk about Denver Jones' defense. When we were at the SEC tournament last year, I mean, in person, it's a different beast in person. And Denver Jones's on-ball defense is incredible. I would like to see a little bit more transition, a little bit more steals, getting and going. But I'm really nitpicking there.
Yeah. Live ball turnovers definitely have not been a focal point or a thing that you've seen a lot from this team. Now, they're still tremendous at forcing bad shots in the half court.
Yes.
And doing a good job of doing the thing that Bruce Pearl has done amazingly throughout his entire career, which is making it hell for you to even inbound the basketball. So the effort's still there defensively, but yes, to your point, the live ball turnovers just aren't there. So you're not seeing a lot of transition stuff. You're really just seeing them force tough contested shots in the half court. And I think the big thing that they're going to have to watch out for when we start talking about some of these teams is making sure they're finishing possessions with a rebound, right? Like that was a thing last year that they struggled with sometimes, is allowing too many offensive boards, particularly against the likes of teams like Mississippi State or Texas A&M. And that's going to be a thing again in the SEC this year. As teams are going to really focus on how they can get additional opportunities versus this team on the offensive glass. But let's talk about a little bit about the schedule, right? January 4th, we kick off the SEC schedule. We have the first 6 games right here. Games in white here are going to be the ones that are home games, and the ones in the alternate blue there are going to be the ones that are on the road. So you start at home versus a Missouri team that I don't know that there's a bad team in the SEC. A Missouri team that started off the season looking like they were going to be one of the weaker ones, and then they all of a sudden go out there and they freaking beat Kansas, and you're like, what? Like, okay, so there's not going to be a cakewalk in the SEC this year, apparently. Then you get Texas, newcomer to the SEC. You get South Carolina, who may be the worst team in the league, but they've got some moxie about them where you just can't take them, lightly, right? You're going on the road and playing there. Number 19, Mississippi State, in my opinion, one of the sneaky best teams in this conference, where it's just like they've got the scoring from the guard position. They're going to be tenacious on the glass. They're going to play tough physical defense, right? So going to be a tough game at home. Go on the road to Georgia, and you finish it off. If it wasn't bad enough, the number 1 team in the country, as it currently stands, as we're recording this, comes to town in Tennessee. What do you think about those first 6 games of the SEC schedule there for Auburn?
Well, to start right away, the opening Saturday, whoever's on the referee job for that one, Ike, just make sure their whistles are ready to go, because Missouri is going to try to draw fouls. They'll try to draw a few more fouls, and then they'll try to draw a few more fouls. So, I mean, I think that's gonna play right into kind of Auburn at home. They're not going to get that. They're not going to get that whistle. If it was on the road and it's like you're opening up on the road, you're on top of the world, you might go and get in some foul trouble. This team beat Kansas at home. I would be like, it would raise some eyebrows for me. But like you said, with the rebounding, Missouri's not one of the better rebounding teams. They do have Mark Mitchell, who has been really underrated for them so far. But not going to kill you on the glass. So I think you're cruising through that first one there. Then
next
you
up,
want me?
Texas.
You just want?
Just roll.
Yeah, I can just fly through. Yeah. So, the thing with Texas is, Evan Mia does. We had him on Southeastern 16. Does an analytics. He does a great analytic of if you play better against good teams or if you play worse. Like, do you play up to your competition? Do you play down to your competition? And Texas is one of the worst teams at playing up. Every time they've played a good team so far, things have fallen apart. The efficiency's gone out the door. Look at that UConn game. Even look at NC State down the stretch of that game. It was just so sloppy. So I think this is a game that Auburn will win defensively. This will be something where you can shut off the glass. They don't pass it very much, Texas. It's a very ISO-heavy team with Mark and Kaluma. Those guys like to just go one-on-one. And as you said earlier, Ike, forcing tough shots in the half court, I think Texas is in for a long night of that.
Yeah.
And South Carolina, tough place to play. You don't want to take that team lightly. Lamont Paris, you just don't doubt that guy. All right. They've got a good defense. Zachary Davis at the 3 could give a guy like Baker Mazzara some problems, maybe match him athletically, a rare thing a team can offer defensively.
Right.
So it's always a tricky game when you go to South Carolina, but again, probably one of the bottom 2-3 teams in the league right now. But hey, it's not really a knock when we're talking about this league right now.
Right.
So first 3 games, I would predict a 3-0. Probably the scariest one would be that that South Carolina, if you take it real lightly and you go and you shoot 2 of 14 from 3 and you can't get anything to go, right? But who knows? And then cruising through, that's the big one right there. You nailed it, Mississippi State. When we talk about this league, there's a lot of teams that's kind of a copycat league. You kind of have teams that try to match that A&M and Mississippi State offensive rebound. You had Florida try to match it last year, and then kind of going the 5 out like Alabama ran last year. Now Mississippi State's running 5 out. This is a tough team to prepare for. Yeah. What other team has a guy like Hubbard and running the action they run for him, but then kind of has a Swiss Army knife in Cam Matthews, and then Kashawn Murphy he might be in the conversation if there's a most improved player award in this league. Kashawn Murphy might be in the conversation for that, what he's doing at that kind of stretch 5 for them. So my gosh, that is a scary one for anybody in this league.
Josh Hubbard to me is probably one of the most scary guys to walk into any arena, just because he's fearless. And Auburn forces tough shots. Josh Hubbard's a tough shot maker, right? And so it's like he doesn't care. It's like, all right, cool, hand up, physicality, all of that. No, I don't care. I'm scoring 25 and deal with it. So, so yeah, Josh Hubbard's one of those guys where when he walks into the arena, you already know, like, start guarding him the minute he checks in.
Yeah, you do catch them at home though,
right?
So I like that. You know what? It's funny. Like the two probably who I would say, it might be a little bit controversial. Someone might say Texas is above them, but I would say Missouri and Mississippi State out of those first 4 we just talked about would probably be the toughest 2. And you get them both at home. Right. So that's always a plus. Toughest game, though, I think might be this Georgia game on the road, because you sandwich it right in between the 2 huge home games, 2 biggest home games of January so far here. And then you got Georgia on the road, a team that can match the height, can match the physicality. They don't play a single guy under 6'5". Like, they don't even have a guy rostered under 6'5". So it's a rare team that's going to be able to go hit the glass and is going to be able to say, hey, you want to play physical? Well, you're in our gym tonight. Let's play physical. It's one of those kind of trap games in between 2 big ones.
Right. Yeah, I think that's going to be you nailed it as far as a trap game, and it's on the road. So it could be one of those games where, especially if it's going to be the toughly contested contest that we think Mississippi State is going to be, where you might go through a very physical game there and you squeak one out, and then you go on the road against a team that's going to be physical right back to back, essentially. Could be a very tough game for Auburn, where it sits on the schedule, and trying to figure out how to keep your emotions from being too high or too low for whatever happens in that Mississippi State game, and then trying to ramp back up coming into that Tennessee game, which everybody's got circled on their calendar.
Yeah. One more quick note before we go into that Tennessee game for Georgia. That January 18th is a Saturday. So that's a home game on a Saturday. The Wednesday, the midweek game for Georgia, is at Tennessee. So they most likely will have just been coming off of a midweek loss, playing at home against Auburn coming off of a midweek win. Just kind of adds.
That's a tough back-to-back for Georgia, man.
Oh,
playing
my
the
gosh.
number 1 and number 2 teams back-to-back is crazy.
There's no letting up in this league. And then there's the big one, Tennessee. I'll be honest. I think Tennessee, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think Tennessee is one of those teams where if we see them lose to a good team, say Florida, they have to go on the road to Texas. Say we see them lose. I feel like a lot of people are going to really reel back on Tennessee, because the only quality wins so far are Louisville. Well, meanwhile, that was on the road and they just hammered
destroyed
them. Baylor, same thing, but it's not. The Baylor just doesn't seem like it's Baylor of years past. And then the 2-point win on the road at Illinois, which is a fantastic win. But when you're comparing it to a schedule like Auburn's, where if Auburn was to drop a game, you'd be like, okay, guys, come on. Look at what they've done.
Right.
Tennessee is a team where if they do drop a game, I feel like people will be like, well, they haven't really, what wins do they have?
Right.
So
They'd be on everybody's fraud alert at that point in time, where it's like, okay, maybe it was a little fool's goal with the non-con schedule that they played. And okay, now we're seeing them come back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah. So this could be a massive, massive opportunity for Auburn. I'll make a little bit of a prediction here, Ike. This could be one of those Auburn home games where it gets out of hand and it's Auburn in a rout, and people are like, this might be, we might not be talking about greatest team of this year. We might be stretching the years back when we're talking about this Auburn team.
If they continue with the efficiency that they have offensively, it's going to be really it's tough to beat a team that just doesn't miss shots, right? Like, it's like, okay, if they're just not going to miss, how do you win the game? Especially if they're going to play good enough defense to keep you in the 60s. And if they're scoring 80 plus a game, it's like, all right, well, math, you lose. So yeah, it's difficult. In those first six, though, which is the one, if Auburn drops a game in this, which one do you feel like? You think it's that Georgia game there, the trap game? Okay.
I do.
So 5-1 potentially coming out of that stretch with the home draw of Mississippi State and Tennessee there.
Oh, I would say 6-0, but if there is a game, they drop, it'll be that Georgia game. I bet.
I'm definitely not mad at it, because again, I agree with you about just kind of where that game is and kind of the physicality that you expect coming off of Mississippi State, and really sandwiching it in with another very physical game. That's a 3-game stretch where you're going to play three of probably the top 5 most physical teams not named Auburn in this league. You're going to get Mississippi State, Georgia, Tennessee back to back to back. That's a tough physical grind that you have to go through for those 3 games there in a 11-day stretch.
Yeah, and Georgia's the number 2 offensive rebounding team in the league right now, just behind, obviously, A&M's going to be.
Right.
So
I don't know how Buzz Williams just continues to just find guys that do that every single year. But yeah, somehow he gets guys to buy in, and we'll get there talking about A&M later in this thing. But every year he finds a team that's bought into, we're going to go crash the offensive glass, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, here inside of the LAUB Town podcast with our guy Max Barr from Southeastern 16, talking a little Auburn hoops here, previewing the SEC season. Potentially, according to Max, it wasn't me. Max said potentially Auburn gets through unscathed there in the first 6 games, going 6-0. We'll hop into the second 6 here. And we will talk about what is potentially on the plate for Auburn starting at the end of January with a trip to Baton Rouge versus LSU, going to play against Ole Miss, a team that I think is kind of, I don't know what Ole Miss is yet. If we're being honest, they've got some impressive games that they've had. They've also had some kind of like, what was that games that they've had this season. You go on the road versus an Oklahoma team that is looking better and better every time you see them take the floor. I think it's going to be interesting to see what that happens, but that's going to be at home. Then you go get Florida at home, travel up to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt, and then the in-state rival Alabama, wrapping up that next set of 6. What are we feeling about this second little group here of 6 games for Auburn in the SEC schedule?
I'm not going to lie. I like the road slate to start the season for Auburn. You got Texas, South Carolina, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss. None of those, I'm not saying any of those teams are awful, but you're not catching some of these juggernauts at the top so far that are ranking top 10 in analytics sites and stuff like that. So not a bad road start. LSU, poor LSU. The big man Jalen Reed was on a breakout tear first few games of the season, goes down. It's a massive loss for them, and they haven't really been tested since he's gone down, besides that SMU game, and that was not very pretty. LSU just plays right into Auburn's strengths. LSU's not going to be able to rebound the basketball. They're going to have to make a lot of threes, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Right.
playing against how Auburn's been playing so far. Ole Miss, I agree with you. Sometimes, because I think the only games I've missed are the Lindenwood and the LIU game opener for Ole Miss. The other games I've watched them, and it is not consistent. It is not consistent at all. Sometimes they're playing through Brakefield and Dre Davis, and they're just super physical. Sometimes they're letting Padula shoot near 30 shots, it feels like. And then other games, it's just balanced. I can't get a feel on this team. The game today against Memphis actually got way out of hand. Kind of their glue guy, Mikal Brown-Jones, him and Malik Dia kind of rotate at the 5, both of them kind of playing small ball there. And Brown-Jones actually threw a punch at Cisse and got ejected. He takes out their physicality and they lose by 17. So Ole Miss is going to be able to run and gun with teams. Ole Miss against Mississippi State, it's going to be a blast to watch, all those guards running around. When Ole Miss plays a big physical team, it's not going to go well for the Rebels. So I honestly think these are two great matchups to start out on the road. And then, again, you grab Oklahoma and Florida, two really good teams. You grab them at home. Right. So the way that this home and away sets up here, first, what are we, 10 games into the conference schedule now? The way the home and away sets up, it couldn't have worked out any better, honestly. And the same thing for Oklahoma. Oklahoma does a lot of great stuff with their guards. If you haven't seen the youngster Fears yet, man, amazing. He is so much fun to watch. And the funny thing is he looks like he just turned 18. He looks like he's a youngster, right, and he doesn't play like it at all. Awesome stuff. Duke Miles, the guys can shoot, but what they can't do is defend the glass. So just like Ole Miss, Oklahoma, they'll be able to play with those, high-paced three-point shooting teams. They love to shoot, but they're not going to rebound that well. And I think this would be a game that Janai Broome, they really don't have anyone to guard Janai Broome. Interior rim protection is a big problem for Oklahoma, but it is a team that can hit 12 to 15 threes, and it's not that much of a surprise. They've done it a few times already.
That's one of the other things that I won't say worry about with Auburn, but listen, that's the nature of college basketball. If you catch a team on a heater and they're just out there bombing away on you, it's difficult. Even though I think, listen, it's in the home gym for Auburn, right? So maybe they can match them shot for shot at home. If it were on the road, it would be probably, to your point, a little bit more of a, hey, circle that one on the calendar game for Auburn versus Oklahoma.
Yeah, but also you never know. I actually made a prediction that I think it was back in June or July that Auburn was going to go undefeated at home this year. I think they've got the best home court in the league right now. It's just no other place has the ability to just completely drain the confidence of another team within 5 minutes.
Yeah, I go back to last year's South Carolina game. South Carolina's a top 25 team walking in there, all the confidence in the world. They're making life difficult for everybody who they play. And they walked into Neville Arena last year and got dismantled. It was almost you felt bad for him. Janai Broome and freaking Jalen Williams combined for 8 threes or something crazy like that. And it was it's wow. How do you even stop that buzzsaw in that building until Kentucky came in there and did it? So yeah. But still, very tough place to play. That game
was so weird. That was a weird game. That was a really weird game. But yeah, so I think catching Oklahoma and Florida here, moving on to Florida, I think catching them at home is a really big deal, especially Florida. Florida last year had one of the biggest efficiency splits home and away.
Yeah.
Interesting to see if it carries over this year, obviously. Different team, but catching Florida on the road last year was a big difference from having to go to Florida. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This is a team that can match up pretty well with Auburn. They can match up. They've got a ton of experience, loads of experience. They've got probably the best guard in the game with Walter Clayton Jr., I would say. He's one of the best guards in the country right now. And then that depth is what I want to emphasize, not quality, because Condon is good. Taking a nice sophomore leap. Chinyelu's tough, but they're not skilled like Broome. But what they do have is 10 fouls between the two of them, something that most teams don't have. And so it's a team that I won't say will be able to compete with Broome skill-wise, but it is a team that has the bodies to not have their depth fall off a cliff if one of them gets in foul trouble or just can't handle Janai, something like that. That's one to circle just because they can match up.
Yeah. I mean, size on the interior, even though, again, so far this year has not proven to be his Achilles heel like it was last year, because you go back to look at the Houston game where you're thinking, okay, they've got enough bigs on the interior, and he's still dominant in that game. And even really, I mean, there hasn't been a game that Janai Broome has not performed admirably in so far this season, even against, Duke, one of the best defenses in the country. They've got a lot of size on the interior, which, the kid's 7'1", 7'2" that starts there. You could bother him, but athletically, he just wasn't able to stick with him for the majority of that game. So, but to your point, I think there's a difference in the physicality and athleticism of the bigs there in Florida. They're not just size; they're size and athleticism, and they're physical, and they're going to go out there and challenge him on the glass and all those things that make it tough for an Auburn team to really do the things that they do well, which is, again, force the tough shots, close it out with a rebound, and get into the half court. But, again, at home, definitely a good draw there.
Yeah, you said I want to highlight, you said bother. I think that's the perfect description of what Florida can do to Auburn. They can bother them. I'm not saying they're going to, go out there in the front court's going to be having a great day for Auburn, but they can definitely do some things to bother Auburn. But catching them at home, I'm going to go with Auburn there. Moving on to the road to Vandy. Vandy is another team that I think kind of similar to who was I talking about? I was talking about Tennessee when I said if they lose a game, people will just kind of really drop their opinions on them. Vanderbilt's a team that's kind of also in that category because they haven't played a team even in the top 50.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know. Do they go on the road to LSU to open the season up and they lose? And it's like, oh man, is Vandy one of the, are they in the bottom few again? I don't really know yet. As for a matchup against Auburn, Vanderbilt, they're very efficient offensively. I mean, they play multiple different point guards at different times. Almost always they got two on the floor. So they run a fun offense. I mean, it's fun to watch. It's entertaining. But what they don't do is rebound. They got Devin McLaughlin, who played the 4 at BC last year, who is he's a good rebounder. But it would kind of be like if Auburn was playing Chaney at the 5.
Right.
It's like, I mean, he can hold his own, but you wouldn't want him there.
Right.
And so that's just kind of the cards Vandy has been dealt here. Byington had to assemble an entire roster. So it'll be a fun game to watch. I bet there's going to be a lot of points scored. But I don't think this is a game Janai Broome could have a double-double in the first 10, 15 minutes of.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that completely. And then
the big one,
Bama on the road, right? Like if there's a game in the first 12 where you're like, I don't know how Auburn gets past this one with a win, it's got to be on the road in Coleman Coliseum.
Yeah, you nailed it. If there's one game that I could say with any sliver of confidence, I think Auburn loses this game. Like if those words come out of my mouth, it seems foreign to say at this point in the season, but it is that game.
Yeah.
It's the Super Bowl. It's a Super Bowl. Same thing for when Alabama plays at Auburn. It's Auburn's, it's the biggest thing in town. Right. And that has, whether you like it or not, that has a very big impact on the game. And I will say matchup wise, I don't think Alabama matches up that well with Auburn this year. I thought Big Cliff was going to be a dominant force I thought it was last year. You're playing Grant at the 5. He can't be as efficient as he wants to be. He's getting in foul trouble. You bring in one of the best shot blockers in the nation, and boom, problems fixed. Has not been the case.
Yeah.
Has not been the case. And so I wanted to say in the preseason, this is an Alabama front court now that can hang. They got one of the best shot blockers in the nation. They're going to be able to hang with them. That has not been the case at all. So where I want to tell you, Ike, I want to be able to say, I confidently think this would be a game that Auburn drops. I can't sit here and say that. I can't. I think Auburn goes to Tuscaloosa, and I don't think their offensive efficiency moves a smidge. I think they do exactly what they want. So I don't know. That game's up in the air for me. Preseason, I would have told you Tide are winning it. Now, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that you highlighted is the interior defense. Like, again, the problem everyone has to solve is Janai Broome.
Yes.
And because he's passing so well this season, it's not just a simple matter of double team him and get the ball out of his hands. And because they're shooting the ball from the outside so well, and it's not just outside shooting, right? Like they're playing high-low ball with him and Cardwell out there, right? Like he's finding ways to say, okay, once they figure out this is where the double team is coming from, then you're done. Like you need to come into the game with 3 or 4 different ways of how you're going to bring double teams and keep switching that so that he's not able to read it. Because the minute he gets a read on where the double team's coming from, you're toast. And if you don't have someone who can play him one-on-one, a la Duke, who they felt like, all right, cool, we can just put a guy again who can just bother him for the vast majority of the time when he's getting his touches, and we don't have to bring that extra defender. Bama doesn't have a guy that's going to do that. They did, like, if you put Grant Nelson or what's the other kid's name? The center
Stevenson? There? Or Sherelle?
All of them are lunch meat. I'm sorry. Just if we're being honest, they're just not able. They're not going to be able to handle Janai Broome on the interior. Or they're just going to be in foul trouble the whole game. Like, I just don't know how, with the way that Bama has played interior defense thus far this season, how Janai doesn't score 30 in this game if you don't double team him.
Yeah. I that's crazy how exactly the same we thought about this matchup. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And one thing real quick, it might not have much to do with this individual matchup, but just when you're looking at the numbers for Auburn right now, they're breaking records.
Right.
And you did it without Broome for a game, and you've done it with Howard, being a factor, stepping back for a little bit, making his way back into the lineup. Clearly, an offensive boost from the wing that was not there behind Baker Mazzara last year. They haven't had everything.
Yeah. So Miles Kelly's had a hurt wrist for like the vast majority of the season. It's like, I don't know. It's, of course I'm excited about it, but it has to be a scary proposition to say they're not even like at full strength yet, and they're wiping teams away. So it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough trying to figure out a good way to win. And the only thing I think that gives Bama a little bit of extra whatever is home game, and they can even they haven't shot the ball as well from 3 this year, but they have the guys that if they catch you on the right night, they can put up 12, 15 threes in that game. They're now at the rate at which they're actually dropping them this year, they're going to have to shoot 40 of them to hit 15, but still they have no problem throwing 40 threes up in that game. So, it's a possibility that becomes a bigger issue if they're just on fire from 3. But again, I think the problem is, unlike in the Duke game where you have a guy come off the bench and hit 6 threes in the first half and give you a big deficit going into halftime, Duke has the defense to be able to neutralize you a little bit while you're trying to figure out how to attack them. I don't know that so far this season, Bama has shown the propensity to shut teams down in that way, particularly, again, when your best player is a post guy and they don't guard particularly well on the interior. Yeah,
it's probably going to be one of those games, just looking ahead right now, it has one of those. It has a feeling of we would know going in who the better basketball team is, but then you watch the first 10 minutes. Or say you miss the first like 5-10 minutes of the game and you check the box score on your phone. Auburn's 0 of 5 from 3, Alabama's 4 of 7.
Right.
And you're like, you got to be kidding me. This is how the game is starting. I knew this was how the game was going to start. I'm not saying that's going to happen. It just has one of those feelings to it where you know who the better team is, but it doesn't play that way. And just a bunch of different factors come together. It has one of those feelings.
Yeah, I listen, I don't disagree with you. I said it of the first 12, that's the one that in my mind, I'm like, okay, again, mostly preseason prediction. Like I was like, okay, I don't know if they're going to be able to win inside of Coleman Coliseum with the way that Alabama's still a really good basketball team. Like this is not me saying that they're not good. But we'll see what happens. So if you're given a tentative assessment there, first 12 games of the season, you said 6-0 potentially for the first 6. This second 6, you're thinking still going through unscathed?
I'll say you drop 1, whether it's Florida or Alabama. As good as Oklahoma is, I'm not trying to knock Oklahoma. I think it's a bad matchup. I don't think they have the front court for it. I think Florida can do some things there, and they have the guards to have a however many threes night. And very similarly to Alabama, just less of the front court and more of just having that crowd that, probably some bad calls, whatever you want to name it.
Right.
I'll say you drop 1 between Florida and Alabama, 11-1.
That's fair. That's absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. All right. We are coming down the home stretch here inside of the LAUB Town podcast, part of the Auburn Express on the War Report podcast network. I'm in here with Max Barr from Southeastern 16. So far, Max feels like Auburn could be 11-1 going into the final stretch of the SEC schedule, in which they get a draw of a team that is on the ascension now that they're a little healthy in Arkansas. Then they play the rematch versus Georgia. You get the rematch versus Ole Miss. You go and you have to face the Kentucky Wildcats, who have been an enigma so far this year, where it's like, really, they were an enigma last year. They switched coaches. It doesn't really matter. Kentucky is going to be the most unpredictable team in the conference, it seems. Texas A&M, and then you finish it off with the home game versus the arch rival Alabama at home. What are you feeling about this final stretch here for the Auburn Tigers in this SEC season?
This is a fantastic final stretch. Whoever was pulling the strings behind this schedule, bravo on this final stretch. Arkansas, you nailed it. On the rise, getting healthy, growing a little bit of confidence. You can see the young guys are starting to play with some more confidence. The only thing is, Jonas Adu, as good as he is, okay, because he does some great stuff, and now he's getting healthy, and you can see how he's changing the mold of Arkansas. He struggles against the elite bigs. You look back to Edey and Kalkbrenner last year, his games against them, even his games against Broome last year. He doesn't really have that physical base of a frame to be able to keep the low post positioning pushed out where it needs to be. And Broome's just going to be able to catch the ball in his wheelhouse the whole night, right where he wants it. He's just going to be able to out-muscle him. And so his backup also, Big Z, same deal there.
Right.
Not really going to be able to stick his feet in the ground and keep Broome out of the positioning he wants him in. And Bruce Pearl's flex, they're just going to be able to run their offense all night. So as good as Arkansas has looked the past few games, I think they run into a buzzsaw there, and they're not able to stop that low post game. Georgia, the rematch, I think this is a pissed off team because you probably didn't play as well as you wanted to the first time. Super physical game, and you're looking for revenge, and you're catching Georgia on the road. And one thing Georgia doesn't do that well is shoot the 3-ball. And so if you can catch Georgia in a game where they're not making shots and they're on the road and kind of all they have is the physicality to lean back on, and you've got a team that can battle them there, That's where Georgia's going to struggle sometimes this year. They do get to the free throw line a lot, so I like that it's at you get them at home in this game, but I don't think they struggle with Georgia at home this year. I just don't think Georgia has the individuals on offense. They don't have enough to be able to make the tough shots that they would need to win a game on the road like this. And then Ole Miss, same story as the first game, but this time just emphasize it. Ole Miss I really thought last year, Ike, with their rebounding numbers being as bad as they were, surprisingly so, because they had some of the tallest guys in the country.
Right.
But I thought that they would really hammer the portal and getting boards and they got Dre Davis, who's a good rebounder, but still they get out rebounded in almost every game they play. It's going to be a problem. And against a team like Auburn and Broome, they don't have anyone that's going to be able to defend him. They got the freshman John Bull, but they really don't play him too much against the elite competition. You look at the game that Trey Kaufman-Red had against Ole Miss and just slapped Janai Brooms onto that, and he probably has even a better game.
Right.
So I think you have a great three game stretch there. Late February too. This is usually when we see some mental fatigue, some tempers flaring. It's a tough time. It's been cold for a while now. So to get a nice 3 games in a row at home, refresh, and then you got those 2 on the road, like, man, March 1st, March 4th, welcome to March.
Right.
That's a tough start right there. When you look at these 2 teams, they play very different. And that's a storyline to this 2-game road stretch here. You have a Kentucky team who probably practice the games before are going to be all defense. Let's stop this action. We know they like to do this. That we know they like to play through this guy. Kobe Bryant gets the ball. Don't give him any space. But then real quick after that, it's going to be, you need to rebound. You need to rebound, and then you got to rebound some more.
Yeah, it's basically we're going to just turn and face guard everybody and try to keep them off the board, because otherwise you don't have a prayer. They're going to have 30 offensive boards or something stupid like that at home. And so, hopefully, very early right now, hopefully Wayne Taylor is okay, but Wade Taylor is just one of those guys who can be a difference maker, specifically when he's at home, and he's a veteran guard out there. And, and by this time in the season, even if he is injured, hopefully they'll have him back. Like, I'm not one of those people who's just like, man, he's out. Good. I want to see Wade Taylor play in this game versus Auburn. Yes,
100%. I believe it's a groin issue, isn't it? I believe. Yeah. So I'm right there with you. I hope he plays also. But the thing is with A&M at home, okay, because they're not going to shoot very well. You'll get some games where they'll make their 8-9 threes, and it feels like, of course we catch the Texas A&M game where they can't miss from 3. Of course, that'll happen. But the thing about Texas A&M is, besides the shooting, exactly what you're going to get. Exactly what you're going to get. Right now, they're rebounding 45% of their misses.
Wow.
So that's in the SEC on a level like this, that blows my mind. But exactly what you're going to get. They're not going to be too efficient. They're going to make it real muddy. A lot of free throws, a lot of battles for loose balls. And at home, right after you just played at Kentucky, and you've got the big one, regular season finale at home against Alabama waiting for you. If you go to Texas A&M and you don't shoot well, now you're right there even with them, because they're not shooting well. You're not shooting well.
Right.
Well, let's play football.
Yep.
So
basically, it's so who wants it more right here in the trenches. We got to go muck it up and figure out how to get to every loose ball, every rebound, and figure out how to stay out of foul trouble in the midst of all of that.
This is a team that can do that. I'm not saying they can't, right? Just tall tasks sandwiched in between Kentucky and Alabama. I kind of skipped over Kentucky there a little bit. I'm sorry about that. I'm confident in Auburn against Kentucky. I I feel like even though it's on the road, I know it's on the road. So basically just any SEC game on the road this year, raise your eyebrows a little bit.
Right.
That's just how good the league is right now. But what we're seeing with Kentucky, it's a little bit of a trend now, is when they play a team that can out physical them, that Otega Owe can't just put his shoulder down and get to the rim. Butler can't just put his shoulder down. They're starting to struggle. They struggled against Clemson and Jaden Zachary, that guard. He made life very difficult for him. And that Shefflin big for Clemson, I'm going to exaggerate, but he had like 30 rebounds almost. Right. I think it was in the 20s. And so you're seeing with Kentucky, the way they like to run their offense, it's clean, it's pretty, it's pristine. But if the defense on the other end isn't letting it be that, we're starting to see some low scores, some 65, 66, some low totals. You score 65 or 66 against Auburn, you're not going to win the game.
Yeah.
So I trust Auburn's offensive efficiency over 40 minutes far more than I trust Kentucky's right now. I think they match up pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, and to that point, defensively, Kentucky is not a team that really scares you defensively, particularly their shot blocking ability. Now they've got athleticism, right? And they've got length, but so does Auburn this year, right? Like you're not trotting out Todd Pettiford, aside, you're not trotting out sub 6 foot guards out there this year with Auburn. You're trotting out guys that are going to be 6'4" and up for the vast majority of that team. And you don't really, you've got a couple of guys out there for Kentucky who could light it up at home.
Yes.
You can again, same story that we've said before. You can catch somebody on a really hot shooting day, and this Kentucky team could fill it up from 3. Absolutely, yes. You can see them go out there and they could hit 15. That's the number I keep throwing out there, but 15 threes in a game, and it wouldn't be surprising for you. I just don't know that overall. Again, the same thing I said earlier, that the defense is going to be able to keep Auburn at bay, even if you have a hot shooting night from Kentucky. And that's going to be the difficulty for Kentucky in this matchup is how do you stop Auburn? Okay. We can score points. Great. How do you get stops? Particularly end of game. If it's going to be a back and forth contest, are we going to try to outscore them in this game? I don't know. Because if Auburn wanted to, and they haven't really tried to do it for anybody this year yet, if they wanted to, they could just play half court ball and grind that game to a halt. And as long as they're not turning the ball over and letting Kentucky get in transition, all right, cool. You're going to only score 60 something points. Great. We'll score 72 and get out of here with a win. No problem. Because they can play through the post.
Exactly. You just stole words right out of my mouth. Yeah. It's just that I trust that consistency over the length of the game. And just quick note, Wade Taylor played today as we're recording this. He did play. So, and he might have had a double. So I think he'll be all right.
Maybe he's good to go. All right, cool. Season finale, Auburn, Alabama, inside of Neville Arena. If Bama has the season that they hope that they have, then this would have huge implications towards SEC regular season title. Now, if Auburn has the season that you've predicted so far, they might have it wrapped up by that point in time, because I don't know that there's going to be another team that's going to get through 14 games without a loss, or 12 to 14 games with only one loss in the SEC. Maybe, right? I don't know what Tennessee is going to be at this point in time, and Bama definitely has the ability to roll through a couple of teams here. And again, I say it, Mississippi State and Arkansas, to me, are the two teams right now that could just start rattling off wins and look drastically different in everybody's mind halfway through the SEC season, where you're like, whoa, I didn't expect, like South Carolina was. South Carolina started the team last year. They started the season halfway through the season. They're the best team in the conference, or top 2 team in the conference. And you're just like, what, South Carolina? What the heck is this? That could be Arkansas, Mississippi State this year, I think, for the SEC.
No, 100%. And what are we at? I think so. We're coming into this last game here, and I'll say Auburn drops. I think they'll drop the Texas A&M game, but just for this, I'll say maybe just one of those two road games. You got the road Kentucky, the road A&M. maybe you have a bad shooting night and you catch the other team on fire, something like that.
Right.
So I would say 2 losses coming into this last game here against Alabama.
15-2 at that point in time in the SEC.
Yes. Which sounds crazy, but I think it's only crazy until it's not.
Right.
And I think this is a team that can do it. And so you come into this last game against Auburn, put a little star next to this game. What do the implications mean, like you said? Because the last game of the season can always get a little bit weird. Every year it's a little bit weird, the last game. Some just teams are playing for different reasons. Some team might be you win and you might get a better seed in the SEC tournament.
Right.
The other team might be you don't win, you're never playing college basketball again, type of thing. So you don't know going into it. If we do go into this and implications are still on the line, both these teams, nothing's wrapped up completely. I think this could be one of the best games Auburn has all year, because you're probably wanting your lick back from the game before. You're coming off of 2 straight road games. You haven't played at home since the 26th, and you've been waiting. They'll probably be camping out. I don't know how long before.
Yeah. This might be one of those games where you get another little camp out situation out in front of the arena. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we went over the matchup in the first one, just how I don't trust Alabama's rim protection, and they haven't been shooting it well, but I think everybody knows they're capable. But as of right now, they haven't. When you're talking about this game, Ike, I mean, this is the regular season finale. This is the one. This is the Super Bowl. I think something drastic would have to happen. Injury, some sort of fluke technical, something drastic would have to happen for this thing to not just be all Auburn. I mean, the stars align for this thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Auburn at home versus Alabama, when Auburn has been decent, has always been a difficult game. But, last year, it kind of played out this exact way. It was a toughly contested contest inside the Coleman Coliseum, and then they come to Neville Arena and get waxed. Like, it wasn't even close, right? And so I think it's probably going to play out very similarly this year, where toughly contested contest on the road inside of Coleman, but then you get the game inside of Neville, and Auburn just goes crazy in that one. But again, the only thing that changes my mind about this would be injuries, right? If there's some sort of crazy somebody who is a focal point for what you want to get done is out of that game for some reason, but otherwise, I don't know. This Auburn team, if it's not fool's gold, which you've seen to this point through the non-con, which I don't know how you can make it fool's gold considering the gauntlet of teams that they've run through already, where, that Ohio State game now looks like an amazing win the way that they won that game. Houston's not a fraudulent team. Iowa State, not a fraudulent team, right? You lost on the road to Duke in a game where you really, it wasn't like you just got blown out. Very close game. I don't know how you get a fraud feel from the Auburn team so far this year, unless you're just they're not going to shoot 3 that well all season. Okay, all right, they might have 1 or 2 games where it's a letdown, but when you're shooting sub 50 from inside of 3 just because you're getting quality shots all the time, it doesn't really matter. You're not relying on the 3-point shot for your offense. So again, very difficult team to beat, very difficult to get them at home and win that game as well. So if we look at these last 6, you're saying maybe Auburn drops another 1 to go 5-1 during that last stretch. So potentially, if the stars align properly, 16-2 SEC record for Auburn as they exit the SEC season, with likely wrapping up the SEC regular season title and going into the SEC tournament as a number 1 seed there, with a chance to be back-to-back tournament champs, which that feels like a difficult proposition to win that tournament 2 years in a row. But if there is a team that's built for it, it's definitely Auburn, with the depth that they can throw out there for you, just because they don't have to play guys 40 minutes, even though Janai Broome right now is playing an ungodly amount of minutes per game, which I don't know how what kind of conditioning regimen he went through in this offseason, but He does not seem. Last year, there were times late game where it seemed like even playing high 20 minutes, Janai Broome looked tired. He's playing 30 minutes a game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what his actual average per game is on minutes right now, but doesn't look tired.
In the big ones, in the big games, he's playing up there.
Yeah, but doesn't look tired at all in any of these games. Ridiculous what he's doing right now this season. Probably, if this holds true, is SEC Player of the Year. Probably National Player of the Year. Walking away with every bit of hardware that you can think of for that young man, and he will have earned it if he continues to play this way. Any final thoughts on this Auburn team before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize why this Auburn team is not a fraud, because I have seen it out there. And when you throw out things like best in history or best ever, people automatically just tend to deny, because that's a very bold statement to make.
Right.
I kind of like numbers. I'm a play-by-play guy. I come from play-by-play, so I kind of like them, kind of don't. I really like to just watch the games and trust my eyes, but I'll get into a little bit of numbers here just for a second. Auburn's offensive efficiency right now on KenPom is 131. All right, they'd score. That's how many points you'd score per 100 possessions.
Right.
Okay, so that's first in the country right now. KenPom was founded in 1997. Okay, right now 131 is the highest ever for an offensive efficiency. That's the second is the Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, that Wisconsin team that lost to Duke in the championship. Theirs was 129. Okay, so you're a full 2 points higher right now, offensive efficiency wise, than the second since 1997. Why is that not fool's gold? Because you've played Duke, who has the number 1 defense in the country. You've played Houston, who has the number 3 defense in the country. You've played Iowa State, who has the number 13 defense in the country, but I think it's even better than that number if you actually watch Iowa State play.
Right.
So how is this offensive efficiency, which right now is setting records by a good margin, how is that possibly a fluke when you have played the best of the best already? I just don't get it, because it's not a fluke. I think we truly have, I won't say ever, but this is truly one of the great offensive teams we've seen in the past 20, 25 years. It just is.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you look at the team and you find me a weakness, I'm telling you, you're reaching. Like, yep. You're reaching for a weakness with this team, specifically on the offensive end. One of the best post players in the country, shooting 3 guys on the team shooting 37, 38% up. 4, Chad Baker-Mazar, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, and Tahad Pettiford, all above 37% from 3. They rebound the ball well. They have, so like offensively, the assist to turnover ratio is good. It's just not a team that's easy to guard. And it really doesn't matter what style of defense you want to play against them. They were getting the doors blown off of them, if we're being honest, by Iowa State. And then It was just like they turned a switch on and was like, all right, well, it's time to start scoring points. And they just never stopped scoring points. Chad Baker-Mazar, thank you very much. Same thing with, kind of the Houston game, where it was like it's looking a little ugly. And then all of a sudden, Tahad Pettiford shows up and starts knocking down shots. And you're like, well, who is this? Like, oh, what? Now we got to guard this kid too? What are we doing here? And just find a team that plays a style of basketball. And Auburn's like, all right, we got an answer for that. And they just continue to rattle it off. So again, to your point, I don't know how you look at it and say fraud unless you're reaching for something. So we'll see what happens as this SEC, because again, SEC completely unpredictable.
Oh yeah.
Teams are going to play better than you think they are. Teams are going to play worse than you think they are. And you catch somebody on a random night, they're absolutely going to be able to beat you. But it's hard to look into the future, looking at the analytics and actually watching games and say, oh, that team definitely can beat Auburn.
Yeah.
So
no, it doesn't. It doesn't happen. One last thing, I don't mean to cut you off. One last thing real quick. I just want everyone to remember, Howard has barely even arrived yet.
Yeah.
He's 5 of 9 from 3. I wouldn't call him a Miles Kelly sniper, but you cannot leave him open. Yeah. He'll make it. it's just another addition. All these numbers we're throwing at you guys right now, it's not at full strength. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely a juggernaut of a team, and looking forward to seeing how this season plays out. Max Barr, tell the people if they are unfamiliar with what's going on at Southeastern 16, how they can keep up with all the great work you all are doing.
Yeah, Southeastern 16 on YouTube or any of your podcasts, however you listen. We're live pretty much every day following an SEC game. If an SEC team plays, there is a good chance we'll be live. And yeah, I mean, hey, Ike, can't wait for this season. It's been historic so far, and I can't wait to see what we're in for.
I'm definitely looking forward to it as well. Well, you know who we are. We are right here, the War Report, inside of the Auburn Express podcast, and we will be back at you with more great Auburn content later. But until the next time, and as always, War Eagle, I'm out of here.